Welcome to RegTech Live with Clause Match. The aim of these sessions is to provide you with a 10-minute live discussion around technology and compliance, speaking with leading industry experts every Thursday lunchtime. Today, I'm joined by Paul Huston, the Head of Product of ComplyAdvantage, where we'll be talking about the current status of financial crime. Paul, before we jump into the conversation, would you mind introducing yourself and a bit about ComplyAdvantage?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Freddie, and thanks for inviting me. Paul Houston, so background in financial industries. So I started with JP Morgan, BlackRock, worked with HSBC in terms of their onboarding program for their private bank transaction screening. I knew from ComplyAdvantage perspective, I knew Charlie Dedimpel, founder from JP Morgan. I saw he had a different approach to financial crime risk in terms of bringing in data at scale, smart remediation, and like really easy integration. So I joined back in 2017, and yeah, we've kind of scaled up the company and products since then. So ComplyAdvantage, who are we? We're a tech company. I guess our focus is helping customers in the financial crime compliance space transform how they really manage their work and identify I guess the true positives and stop finding false positives in terms of onboarding, ongoing monitoring, transaction screening, transaction monitoring. We started in 2014. We've got offices in London, in Cluj in Romania, in New York, in Singapore. So yeah, global offering focused on that AML screening and ongoing monitoring, and then yeah, transaction screening, transaction monitoring. Hopefully I've covered everything there.
Great. Well, I guess as we're talking about financial crime, many, I guess, view coronavirus and the pandemic as almost a perfect storm for fraudsters, money launderers, and terror financiers. Is this current environment, is it making the situation get worse across financial crime?
Yeah, I think short answer is yes. It's obviously quite a complex beast. It's affecting a lot of different areas in a lot of different ways. I'd say if I had to pick one, primarily on fraud, we've seen quite a few instances of new types of fraud occurring for a variety of different reasons. So yeah, to answer your question, absolutely. There's obviously existing challenges at play, but there's new use cases almost and new avenues that cybercrime gangs are going after.
I guess, well, what are these new challenges in the space? Have you got some examples?
Yeah, so like there's probably two different examples to talk about. Like one is where we've definitely seen evidence of this, and one is where we think there might be evidence going forward. In the first instance, essentially the way that governments have responded to this crisis is to help out citizens and provide social assistance. And there's a World Bank study, a really interesting study at the moment, which looks at social assistance and the different measures taken by different countries. And by their estimates, about 1.46 billion people have had the way they've, I guess, received money changed. So that's either they were receiving social benefits previously, or this is the first time this has happened. I think there was a great line in an NPR article which said, when governments rush out to disperse money, like cybercrime gangs get really excited. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. So that 1.46 billion people, that's like 1 in 6 people, right? And so that's an area where if you think in terms of like cybercrime gangs, recently there's been a huge focus on data breaches. So we had like Equifax data breach, for instance. What we're seeing now is that information and the identity theft that occurred there, they're starting to capitalize on that. And so they're making fraudulent claims in terms of employment benefits or other types of benefits. So it's a shift. It's like data breaches in the last quarter are actually down, but it's actually these gangs are now capitalizing on those data breaches. And I think the other interesting point there is this is a global issue. It's not just like, I guess, localized in one particular area. So it's happening, like these kind of fraud examples are happening all over the world. So I think you had Washington State, which had $1 billion fraud issue, like based on just like pure Washington State handout. So yeah, that's where we know there's issues happening. I think the other piece that we're seeing is because of the pandemic, the global supply chain has changed massively, both in terms of the types of goods that people are demanding, like so the supply and demand, like the actual goods, but also then the way that those goods get transported. So for instance, one area or industry that we think is going to be, there's probably like a few weaknesses, is shipping and ports. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is it's based on a lot of trust. So like port authorities will know ship owners and they'll know the routes, and it's very predictable. Like you're getting your deliveries in a quite a predictable in a way. That's changing now. So there's new ship owners, there's new routes, as different parts of the world. Like no one knew we would need this much perspex, you know, like no one could have predicted that. So I think that's like one thing where you're starting to encounter a need for heightened understanding of the kind of people and the goods that are moving. And I think that's exacerbated by the kind of nature of the shipping and ports industry, where it's a lot of manual inspection. And so because of physical distancing, you're not able to do that manual inspection as you would have previously. So there's now been a rush to digitization, and it's just not an industry that's really set up for that. Like that, it's worked for hundreds of years without that digitization. So that's an area where we see a bit of a weakness.
Great. And so you said a lot of the things there that have made sort of sparked thoughts around, and you mentioned exacerbation. So the pandemic's exacerbated a lot of current financial crime problems. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, especially in the financial industry, is onboarding. And I now my view is that this exacerbation has highlighted some of the key challenges and inefficiencies in onboarding. That's kind of one example of areas where I think technology can obviously help in financial crime. It'd be really interesting to, as you're an expert in this area, is to get an understanding of how you think RegTech can help either that area or other areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the way it can help, and the way we've really focused on product at ComplyAdvantage, and like Charlie's ultimate, like his vision from early on was, the more data you can provide in an easy to use way that is like relevant and applicable for compliance officers and analysts. And like I've spent a lot of time sitting with them and understanding their jobs. The more you can provide the particular data that they need, the better they can do their job. And so it helps them eliminate false positives much easier, but it also helps them do their job when there is a true positive. And so the incumbent approach has been, we will identify things like sanctions data or politically exposed people data or even adverse media data in quite a manual way. So you've got like teams of maybe 200, 400 analysts manually updating when something's changed. And like the whole point about what we're doing is we automate that as much as possible so you can achieve data at scale. So you think about media, there's just been a proliferation of media. So if you have an approach that worked or kind of worked 10 or 20 years ago, it just doesn't work today because the media has changed, media landscape's changed dramatically. Or even you look at something like sanctions, and where the rate of sanctions increases, or the number of sanctions. And so a good example for us is we can get our sanctions database will be updated within like 2 to 3 minutes of the Department of Treasury changing their database. And that's like an hour and 15 minutes before they send out an email, which is 4 days before the incumbents will update their databases manually. And so you think about this world of, okay, we know there's weaknesses in trade-based money laundering. You want to know as soon as possible when changes occur. So I think we help out in that way. On the adverse media side, yeah, a huge focus on data at scale and using technology wherever necessary to really focus on that. At the moment, like huge focus for us on machine learning and building out a fin crime knowledge graph. That's the best way to bring in disparate data points that, when brought together, really highlight that risk and the hidden risks. And so, like, to your question, we know that there's been a huge increase in fraud. So we made our adverse media fraud tool available for free for the last 3 months. So like to try in our small way to kind of help with that, like overcoming that problem.
Great. Everything you've just covered has been so insightful. I mean, I've learned a lot as well. I think what's really brilliant is you guys are really at a sweet spot where you can really help regulated organizations make some really important changes, not just about, you know, fighting financial crime, but becoming more efficient and cost effective in their approach. And I think actually that's really one of the biggest and most important parts on businesses' agendas at the moment, as well as being compliant. So found this really a really interesting conversation. So thank you again, Paul.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for your time, Freddie. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks again.
Cheers.